All right, welcome to a community partners interview where we explore the organizations, opportunities, and resources that look to make a change in our daily lives. I'm your host, Davy Au, and you're listening to Voices for Ability Radio, all abilities, all the time. Today, I'm joined by Ross Ste-Croix, the executive director of WinReach Farms. WinReach Farms uses an accessible farm environment to provide therapeutic programs and services for individuals of all abilities. They also strive to enrich the lives of persons of all ages with disabilities or special needs by providing opportunities to enjoy experiences in farming, nature, outdoor recreation, and other activities, and to share those experiences with their family and friends. They inspire, empower, and change lives. Ross, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, David.
Well, it's a pleasure, sir. To that end, as we jump in, why don't you tell us and our listeners a little bit more about yourself, what inspired you to work at WinReach Farms and with individuals with disabilities as a whole?
Yeah, for sure. So, not the most obvious career path to get here. I did all of my schooling in sports and physical fitness, and I had been working for sport organizations for a number of years, both at the national and the provincial level, and had gotten up to a leadership level. Was looking for something a little bit different, and I had a few years experience working with Special Olympics Canada, and that was probably the role up to that point in my career that really resonated with me the most. That I enjoyed what I was doing, and I felt a real purpose about the work that I was doing. And so, as I transitioned into sort of the leadership phase of my career, I was really mindful of where I wanted to spend those years and, what kind of an organization would keep me passionate and make me an authentic leader. And so I started to look for opportunities in the disability sector. Now, that being said, I did not have in my mind, I'm going to go work on a farm because I grew up in urban Montreal and didn't know the first thing about farming aside from what type of animals and plants you might find on a farm. But a colleague of mine was doing some research at WinReach Farm, and she knew that I was looking for something in that space, and she reached out to me and suggested that I throw my hat in the ring. And my initial reaction was, "You're crazy. I don't know anything about farming." But she, quickly reminded me that the executive director would likely not be the one taking care of the animals, harvesting any crops, anything like that, but that, it would be the leadership piece that I'd be responsible for, and that this was, maybe a good fit for what I was looking for. And so I took her good advice and I applied, and I started working at the farm in 2018. I was with the farm as executive director for 4 years, and stepped away for another opportunity within the sector, and just recently returned in November of 2024 for a second stint. I missed the place, and I leapt at the opportunity to come back and have a second term.
So an expanded leadership role. Oh my gosh, that was and so many other great so many other great moments that you hinted at, just in all of it, with your interest in working in that environment. And personally, I'd like to thank you for everything that you've been doing in that department. But on the other hand, too, I myself can definitely relate to you on the whole growing up in an urban environment myself. I mean, but for me, I grew up in the heart of Brampton, Ontario, and in my spare time, I'm taking horse riding lessons, and I'm a bit of a cowboy myself. So I get where you're coming from completely about not really not really finding much sense in being a city slicker for lack of a better term, and going out to a more rural environment. But it's an absolute amazing thing that you were able to throw your hat in the ring. So I think it goes without saying again that we appreciate everything that you do in that sense. That being said, in doing a little research on WinReach Farms, I saw on your website that you have a couple programs that are offered, like the work experience program per se. Could you tell us a little about it and some of the other programs that you have to offer?
Yeah, absolutely. So our Windsprout Work Experience program is it's the latest in a long line of work experience programs we've had at the farm over the years. And what we're trying to do with Windsprout is tie in all the best elements of previous programs. So It's launching April 7th of this year, so only a few weeks away. And it'll be a year-long work experience program. The reason being that, when you work on a farm, the type of tasks that you need to do depending on the season change quite a bit, right? As you can imagine, spring is a time of growth and planting and preparing for things. Summer is what everybody thinks of and when everybody wants to come up and visit. And there's lots around taking care of the property and taking care of the animals. And then as you go through the year, obviously those things change. And as we come out of winter, we'll all be happy to say goodbye to snow removal for a while. But what we'll be doing is having seasonally specific sessions for the participants. So they'll engage in 4 back-to-back sessions, making sure that they learn all the skills that they can here on the farm in the areas of animal care, property maintenance, horticulture, and customer service. And so the idea that, we are trying to achieve within this is that individuals with disabilities, already have barriers to accessing employment, right? Just by the nature of what employers feel that they can do. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to close that gap, right? We're trying to provide meaningful vocational instruction in the areas that we're experts in here on the farm, and then trying to connect those individuals through the system to employment agencies, so that they can secure jobs in those areas. Because what often happens is people go direct to an employment agency. They haven't had an opportunity to get some of those meaningful skills first. So we're trying to fill a gap in that space, and really targeting individuals with disabilities, or those who have other barriers to accessing employment, and providing those skills, really targeted towards folks that want to work, right? So that's the Windsprout program for individuals sort of in that same space in their life, which is, post school, and, what's next, and, where do I continue my learning and my social development, and all of those pieces. If the workforce isn't where people are looking to go, we have an adult day program called Learning for Life. And Learning for Life is all about continuing some of the structure that individuals, young adults with disabilities have had in school, but continuing to help them grow and achieve the goals that they have for themselves, whether it be around independent living, social development, whether it's around physical fitness, whether it's working with the animals and spending time here on the farm. And for some people, it's simply a place to come and be and have purpose that is peaceful and provides them with the environment that they're looking for. So, those are a couple of the programs you mentioned. Being a horseback rider yourself, we do therapeutic riding on the farm for individuals as young as 2 years old to any age. And those run seasonally as well, where individuals have a chance to get on a horse, learn some skills, but typically also get a lot of therapy, so to speak, from the bond that they develop with the animal, from learning skills in a non-threatening environment. A lot of folks really they're more at ease around animals than they are with other people in a lot of circumstances. So those are sort of 3 of the biggest programs we have. We also have opportunities for individuals, families, groups to come up and visit the farm, whether it be during the day to take part in some activities and obviously meet all of the animals, or whether they're looking for an overnight accessible accommodation to sort of get away from their everyday and spend a night or 2 at the farm.
And that's absolutely amazing to hear. And the breadth of the breadth of these programs is absolutely amazing to know that there's so much for a single person to choose from. And on that note, there's just so many segues that I can go in terms of asking you about so many other things. Though you touched on what was it, overnight on accessible accommodations. Could you tell us about how someone could go about maybe booking a stay if they wanted to stay at the farm overnight?
Yeah, you bet. And this has been a really important program for us almost since our inception. So the farm, opens its theoretical doors. We are an outdoor facility for the most part, but we opened our gates, let's say, back in 1989. And the first program was the day visitor program, but shortly thereafter, we opened up overnight accommodations. And so what we have here is we have 2 suites on the farm. One's a smaller 1-bedroom suite, another is a 3-bedroom suite for larger groups. And what we offer isn't it's not the Hilton, I often say, or any other of those big big name hotel chains, but what it is, it's truly accessible, right? So they're not overnight suites that just have a wider doorway or a little bit more room to get around. We've thought out what people are going to need in those spaces, right? So there is all that stuff, room to get around. There's roll-in showers in the washrooms. There's hospital beds that are adjustable and movable and accommodate everybody's needs. There's handrails and poles to help people move around and get around. And we have access to lifts for people to transition from wheelchairs into seats, into beds, etc. So all of that on a farm that's also accessible. So individuals can come up. They can book through our website. We've got all our information through there. So windreachfarm.org. Just go under our programs and services, and you find overnight accommodations, and that'll connect you with the individual that oversees the program and has for a number of years to make sure that we're able to not just book individuals and groups in, but that we're able to do so and figure out exactly what their needs are going to be and where their interests are while they're here. So we can kind of customize a little bit of a visit for them as well.
And that's absolutely amazing to hear. And personally, I always prefer. And I mean, this is not to talk down on those larger hotel chains, of which I've never once experienced. But personally, I've always been the type of person who gravitated more towards the homely feel, the homely field, or the homely feel of any sort of a farm, or that sort of environment. And there's just something, there's just something wholesome about it, in my opinion. And I think that to me personally, I think it's a great way for families or people to just get out of their normal comfort zones, escape the hustle and bustle, and just enjoy nature as it is. And the fact that you offer that is absolutely amazing at WinReach. Now, on the note of WinReach itself, before I ask anything else about any programs or whatnot, are there? You mentioned before that you made it a goal to be accessible completely to your to your visitors and whomever else. That being said, and you also said completely accessible, more or less. But are there any restrictions to becoming a member of WinReach Farms at all? Say age, disability type, things of that nature.
Really try to make sure there aren't. And, the honest answer, Davey, is that, the accessibility journey is always evolving. There's always new things that we're learning to continue to strive to make things accessible for everyone. So I'd say, yeah, there will definitely be gaps that people will identify for us that we will then aim to address. But really, no, nothing glaring or obvious that people wouldn't be able to participate in because the farm was set up with its core purpose being accessibility. We've managed over 35 years to keep that at the forefront, right? So anything that we're doing, that's the first question we ask, right? Is this going to be accessible to everyone? And I think to somebody new in the field, accessible to everyone doesn't mean that it is exactly the same, but means that there is an opportunity for everyone to participate in some way, right? So making sure that we have options for people to engage in. I think a perfect example of that is the work experience program. We're very conscious that the Windsprout program is tailored towards individuals that have that drive and that ability, and in some spaces, some of it being physical ability, others being confidence and a lack of anxiety in social situations. And certainly higher intellectual functioning maybe than some of their peers. Because of that, while we launch it, we make sure that we have other opportunities for individuals that want to interact on a different level, right? Not everybody is going to want to come up in a year-long program and then join the labor force. So we have options for folks that want to come up for sort of a lighter version of the program on Wednesdays, which is not as large a commitment, sort of a session by session commitment, and last sort of with that almost school-like structure and more just hands-on out on the field, helping with some of the tasks that we need to get done. And then we also have an opportunity within our volunteer army for individuals of all abilities to come up and engage at whatever level they want. So when we're looking at things, it's making sure that something new, it doesn't necessarily have to suit everybody, but then there needs to be an option that no matter who comes to us and says, "Yeah, I want to be a part of this," that we're able to fit them in and make sure that they can have that experience.
And that's absolutely amazing to know that that can happen. And yeah, so that and now, regardless of the option or the length of the program or whatever offerings you have, without getting too specific or naming any names, are there any success stories about anyone who came onto the farm that you could share that you could share with us about, how they got there and where they're at now?
Yeah, absolutely. We see quite a bit in terms of individuals that are able to access parts of themselves that they haven't before. And what I mean by that is, an example that we shared recently happened within our writing programs. An individual that rode for many years in our program and continues to. And when they came to the farm at a young age, they were nonverbal. They had never spoken to anyone, not in a social situation, not within their own families. And, everybody believed that individual to just be nonverbal. And not terribly long after they started riding and building that bond with the horse that they were riding and coming up to the farm and taking part in learning skills and feeling comfortable and letting go of all the daily stresses that we see people leave at the base of the driveway. This individual began speaking and speaking to their family and the people within the program, and so that's a perfect example of um, the therapeutic effect that can be had. I mean, um, we're not a medical facility. We don't have nurses on staff or medical personnel. But what we find is a lot of the programs and the way they're delivered allow folks to escape from the things that really hold them back in their everyday lives. And so we see that in the writing program, whether it's individuals that are able to develop their core strength for the first time because they're able to get on a horse, which sort of levels the playing field if they have a condition like cerebral palsy where they're not able to walk the same way as their counterparts, but on a horse they're all of a sudden equal, right? We see those opportunities with individuals that start speaking on the horse or start being more social in their personal lives after they leave the farm. And then we also see just the transformation and the joy on the faces of individuals that come up and just visit the farm and are able to interact with the farm, with the animals here, and with the staff in an environment that's always been closed off to them before, right? And because of that, we find that we don't have to make anything terribly complicated. There's no rocket science that's happening here at the farm. It's all about making things simpler and sort of decluttering, people's lives and letting people focus in on the experience that they're having while they're here.
And that's an absolutely amazing thing to hear and know. I wish I wish that my writing experience was that therapeutic my first time around. Is my first writing experience? I remember getting long darted into a cattle trough. um, but as a whole, though, it's absolutely amazing to know that that the farm that the farm in ways helps level the playing field for many people, and it makes me think of an old proverb that one of my mentors when I started riding said to me that that from a classical perspective, a horse is in many ways a person's best friend when they're out in an environment like that because it's just you and the animal doing a job or just and having fun or going through an experience and then trying hard like heck not to let the other down because at the end of the day you're in it like you're almost always in it for them, and it's a give and take bond. But yeah, it's absolutely amazing to know that people can grow and even sort of find a way to healthily release when they're when they're in an environment that's so freeing and welcoming. And yeah, and to that end, it's not. I'm sure that you would agree that this might not always be the case anywhere else. Though, in your opinion, what's one thing that you see happening over and over again to individuals with disabilities that shouldn't be happening, and how do we collectively go about stopping it?
I think it comes down to mentality, right? And it's assuming assuming that you have an understanding of what anybody else needs, right? I think that's the biggest thing that I see, and it's pertinent to everyone, right? I think somebody had said to me earlier on in my career, and it really sort of opened my eyes more, was that at times during all of our lives, we would be considered disabled, right? So for some people, it's their entire life. For some people, it's age related as you get older. Sometimes it's an injury. Sometimes it's something around your mental health. But there's always a range of ability that's going to occur to every individual throughout their life, and everybody's ability to engage with things is going to be different. And so I think, as a society, even those that are really well-meaning, we struggle to get past our impression of what someone else can do. And that we see it manifested in a lot of different ways. We see it with employers that see hiring someone with a disability as an act of charity or something that they should do because it's the right thing. And it doesn't even occur to them that maybe there's actually an economic business reason to do it, right? You think of somebody on the autism spectrum and some of the jobs out there that this individual would probably excel at because of their ability to laser focus in on a task and do something repetitive and be very, very dedicated and loyal to ensuring that they're upholding the standards of that company and the way that that job needs to be done, right? So we see that gap. We see parents and caregivers that, as a parent myself, I try to be mindful of this as my son gets older, of, trying to protect your children or the people you care for more than is actually helpful to them, right? So we hear often from parents like, oh, my son or my daughter can't do that. They're like, is that true, or are you just trying to protect them from life and what might go wrong versus giving them that opportunity, right? And then I think you also see it. And again, sometimes it comes from a good place, but you'll see it when an individual that isn't typically comfortable with or spends time around people with disabilities, when they encounter someone in a wheelchair, for example, you will see how quickly and awkwardly they scramble and try to reach for that chair or push that person somewhere without stopping to ask and say, do you need assistance? Right? It doesn't occur to them at all that maybe this person does wheel themselves around 24 hours a day, every day of their lives, and they're quite good at it, right? So I think it's that mentality and that assumption. And I think the way to combat that is to be conscious of it and to ask questions versus, pushing our assumptions onto people.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And I'm sure, and I'm sure that that's a takeaway that all of our listeners could definitely take home with them after this. Now, that being said, on the note of our listeners, you've mentioned already that we could find information on the organization's website at winreachfarm.org. Though, if our listeners were looking for more information, how could they find and or reach you, sir?
Yeah, the best way for any general inquiries is to send a note to information@winreachfarm.org. That's sort of our central hub for any general inquiries. If you're on our website, there's specific links out about particular programs, but for any general inquiries, the information@winreachfarm.org is the best way to get started. That way we can triage that out to whoever is the most well suited to answer the inquiry and go from there. And we really take the inquiries seriously. We know how much folks sometimes are in need and struggling to get answers, and so getting back to folks and providing that information we see as a critical part of what we do and what we can offer to the community.
And that's absolutely amazing to know. Not only can we look for you on your website, but also at info@winreachfarm.org. Well, thank you so much for all of that, for your contributions and everything that you do, Ross. And with that, we've reached the end of yet another amazing interview. You're listening to Community Partners, presented by Voices for Ability Radio. All abilities, all the time. I'm your host, Davy Au. Be safe, be kind, and I'll see y'all next time.